My name is Emily Carter, and for most of my life, I believed that if I worked hard enough, my parents would finally see me. Not just notice me in passing, not just pat me on the head as though I were some distant relative's child. They would really see me. The way other parents glowed when their children achieved something. The way their voices carried pride when introducing them to others. I kept thinking maybe one day, if I earned enough, studied enough, smiled enough, they would finally give me that look. The look of belonging. Graduation day was supposed to be that moment. It was the culmination of sleepless nights in the library, weekends buried in textbooks, and sacrifices I never let anyone else see. I told myself, this is it, Emily. They'll be there in the front row, clapping for you, maybe even tearing up with joy. That vision carried me through so much. But as I sat in my cap and gown, waiting for my name to be called, I scanned the sea of families in the auditorium. Mothers waving proudly, fathers craning their necks for a better view, siblings holding handmade posters. I kept searching for my parents' faces, my younger brother's crooked grin, anyone from my family. Row after row, section after section, my eyes darted desperately, but they weren't there. My chest tightened as the realization sank in. They hadn't come. I forced a smile as I walked across the stage, shaking the dean's hand, the applause of strangers echoing in the air. To everyone else, it probably looked like I was proud. Inside, though, I felt hollow. I had pictured this moment so many times, the cheers of my parents filling the room. Instead, the silence of their absence roared louder than anything else. After the ceremony, I stood outside with my classmates as they hugged their parents and took pictures that would hang on living room walls for years. I pretended to scroll through my phone, as if I were waiting for someone too. Every laugh around me was another reminder of what I didn't have. And then, when I thought the loneliness might swallow me whole, I heard a voice, "Emily." I turned, and for a second, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Standing a few feet away was Mrs. Thompson, my high school English teacher. She held a small bouquet of daisies in her hand. Wrapped in crinkled paper, her smile was warm, the kind of smile that fills the cracks in your heart without asking permission. "I didn't think you'd have anyone here," she said softly, walking closer. "So I thought I'd come." Tears pricked my eyes, and I had to look down quickly, afraid the flood would break loose if I met her gaze for too long. Mrs. Thompson had always believed in me, back when my parents brushed off my dreams as childish nonsense. She was the first person who told me I had a voice worth sharing. And now, when the people who were supposed to love me most had chosen not to show up, she was standing there instead. We hugged, and for the first time all day, I didn't feel invisible. As we walked to the campus lawn, Mrs. Thompson asked me about my plans, her questions brimming with genuine interest. No judgment, no comparisons, no sighs of disappointment, just care. We sat under a tree as graduates bustled around us, and she told me how proud she was. It was the kind of conversation I had longed to have with my parents, the kind that stitched together all the torn places inside me, at least for the moment. But even as gratitude washed over me, a shadow lingered. Why hadn't my parents come? I had told them the date months in advance, reminded them countless times. They had promised in that distracted way they always did. Part of me wanted to call them, to demand an answer. Another part knew it wouldn't matter. They always had excuses, work, traffic, illness. But underneath it all was a truth I had never wanted to admit. I wasn't a priority to them. Still, something inside me refused to let go of the hope that there was more to it. Maybe this time, the reason was different. Maybe this time, there was an explanation that would change everything. I couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't over, that a truth was waiting in the shadows, ready to be revealed. I didn't know it then, but the absence of my parents that day would set off a chain of events I never could have predicted. Secrets, betrayals, and revelations that would unravel everything I thought I knew about my family. And it all began on that graduation lawn, with daisies in my hand and a teacher's unwavering kindness standing in place of my parents' love. When I got back to my apartment that evening, the quiet was deafening. My classmates were out celebrating, their laughter echoing through the halls, while I sat at my small kitchen table with my diploma folder unopened beside me. I kept glancing at my phone, half expecting a message from my parents, an apology, maybe even a lame excuse. But the screen stayed dark. No missed calls, no texts, nothing. I wanted to believe there was some emergency, something that had truly kept them from being there. But a heavier voice inside me whispered that this wasn't new. My parents had a long history of disappearing from the moments that mattered most. Growing up, I learned early not to expect much from them. My father, Richard, was a man obsessed with appearances. To the outside world, he was the charming businessman, always in a pressed suit, always with the right words. At home, though, he was distant, his eyes forever glued to his laptop or the stock market ticker on TV. My mother, Diane, wasn't much different. She floated through life with a glass of wine in one hand and a sharp word ready for anyone who threatened her comfort. Together, they built an image of success, but left little room for love. Then there was my younger brother, Adam. He was the golden child, the athlete, the one who could do no wrong. Every achievement of his was paraded, around like a trophy, while mine were barely acknowledged. Straight A's, not worth a mention. Winning the debate championship? Barely a nod. Meanwhile, Adam scored 1 goal in a soccer game, and the whole neighborhood knew about it within the hour. That dynamic never changed. No matter how hard I worked, I was invisible next to Adam's spotlight. I thought maybe graduation, earning a degree with honors, would finally tilt the scale, even just a little. But their absence that day was a brutal reminder. I would never matter to them the way he did. I stared at the unopened diploma on my table, and a thought struck me. What if they didn't come because something was happening with Adam? He had a way of pulling their attention entirely, leaving me forgotten in the background. Maybe he had some crisis, some event, and once again they chose him over me. The bitterness burned in my chest as I pictured it. My parents fussing over him while my own milestone faded into nothing. I pushed the thought aside and tried to focus on the daisies sitting in a vase nearby. Mrs. Thompson's gesture kept me from completely collapsing. But when I finally crawled into bed, the questions haunted me. Why hadn't they come? Why didn't they care enough to even send a text? The next morning, I decided I couldn't live with the uncertainty. I dialed my mother's number, my heart pounding as the line rang. She picked up on the third ring, her voice clipped, like I was an interruption. "Oh, Emily," she said, as though she'd just remembered I existed. "We didn't make it yesterday. Things came up, I waited, hoping she would elaborate, but silence stretched between us." "What things?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "Just family matters," she said vaguely. "We'll talk about it later." I felt my throat tighten. "Mom, it was my graduation." "Do you even realize how much that meant to me?" There was a sigh on the other end, the kind of sigh that always made me feel like a burden. "Emily, not everything revolves around you. We're dealing with a lot right now." I wanted to scream, to tell her that for once in my life, I had earned the right to have something revolve around me, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I hung up before the tears spilled over. The rest of the week passed in a blur. I tried to distract myself with job applications and catching up with friends, but the hurt lingered. Every time I saw the diploma on my desk, the ache returned. And then, just when I thought I could bury the pain, I got a call that changed everything. It was Mrs. Thompson again. She invited me to dinner at her house, saying she wanted to celebrate properly since my own family hadn't. I hesitated at first. I didn't want to intrude, but her warmth was hard to refuse. So that Saturday, I found myself standing on her porch, the smell of roasted chicken wafting from inside. The evening was simple, filled with laughter and stories. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I belonged somewhere. As we cleared the dishes, Mrs. Thompson sat me down with a serious expression. "Emily," she said gently, "I don't want to overstep, but I think you deserve to know something. I've known your family longer than you realize, and there are things they've kept from you. Things that might explain why they didn't show up." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" She hesitated. Her eyes filled with both concern and something I couldn't quite place. Regret, maybe. "It's not my story to tell entirely. But I can give you this. Their absence wasn't about you. It was about them. And if you dig a little, you'll uncover more than you expect." Her words echoed in my mind long after I left her house. For the first time, I wondered if my parents' neglect wasn't just indifference. Maybe there were secrets buried beneath their polished surface. Secrets that could shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. I didn't know it yet, but pulling on that thread would unravel a truth far darker than simple favoritism. The following days were restless. Mrs. Thompson's words clung to me like a shadow I couldn't shake. "It wasn't about you. It was about them." What could that even mean? I replayed her expression in my mind. The hesitation, the weight of her voice. She wasn't the type to stir up drama without reason, which meant whatever she hinted at was real and serious. For years, I had told myself my parents just didn't care enough, that I was invisible because Adam stole the spotlight. But now, a new thought wormed its way in. Maybe they had been hiding something. Maybe their neglect wasn't just cruelty, but strategy. I started with the obvious. I scrolled through Adam's social media pages, searching for any clue about what my family had been doing on the day of my graduation. Pictures of him at parties, posed next to his teammates, his arms slung casually around his girlfriend. Nothing unusual, nothing that screamed family emergency. But then, I noticed a gap. He posted almost daily, yet there was silence for 2 whole days, the very same 2 days surrounding my ceremony. It wasn't much, but it nagged at me. Next, I called my Aunt Carol, my mother's older sister. She had always been the black sheep of the family, openly critical of my parents' obsession with appearances. She rarely visited, but when she did, she slipped me candy and whispered, "Don't let them make you small, Em." When she answered the phone, her voice was warm but wary. "Emily." "Well, this is a surprise. Everything okay?" I swallowed hard. I wanted to ask, do you know why my parents didn't come to my graduation?" There was a pause, and I could almost hear the cogs turning in her mind. "Did they tell you anything?" "Nothing, just that they were dealing with things." A sharp laugh escaped. Her. That's one way of putting it. My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" "I shouldn't be the one to tell you," she said carefully. "But Emily, your parents have built their entire lives on lies. And lies have a way of catching up." I pressed her, begged her, but she wouldn't give me more. All she said before hanging up was, "Be careful where you dig. The truth isn't always what you want it to be." Her words left me shaken. If it was just about Adam, she would have said so. This was something deeper. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Memories began resurfacing, small, strange moments I had brushed aside before, like the time I overheard my parents whispering in the kitchen when they thought I was asleep, their voices urgent and fearful, or how my father always locked his study, even when he stepped out for just a moment, or the way my mother avoided certain topics altogether, deflecting with sharpness if anyone pushed. At the time, I thought it was just their way of keeping control, but now, it felt like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't realized existed. I needed answers, and I knew exactly where to start. The next afternoon, when I knew my parents would be out, my mother at her book club, my father at some networking event, I drove to their house. The driveway was empty, the windows dark. My hands trembled as I used the spare key hidden in the garden gnome by the porch. Walking into that house always felt suffocating, as though the walls themselves carried their judgment. Everything was pristine, curated for guests rather than lived in. But I wasn't here to admire the spotless counters or the carefully arranged family photos where Adam shone at the center and I was tucked away at the edges. I was here for my father's study. The door was locked, of course. It always was. But I remembered watching him once, years ago, when he slipped the key into the drawer beneath the hallway table. My breath caught as I opened that drawer now, and sure enough, the key was there. The study smelled of leather and old paper. Books lined the shelves, their spines gleaming as though they'd never been touched. On the desk sat his laptop, closed, and a stack of files neatly arranged. My fingers hovered over them, hesitating. This was a line I couldn't uncross. But the memory of sitting alone on my graduation day pushed me forward. I opened the first file. Inside were bank statements, but not from accounts I recognized. Offshore accounts, with balances that made my head spin. Transfers to names I didn't know, large sums moving in and out. My father didn't just have money, he had hidden money. Heart pounding, I flipped through more folders. Legal documents, contracts with companies I'd never heard of. And then one thin file that made my blood run cold. It was labeled with a single word, Adam. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were documents detailing some kind of agreement, payments made in his name, property registered under it, even references to medical records I didn't understand. None of it made sense, but one thing was clear. Adam wasn't just the golden child. He was at the center of something much bigger. A sudden noise from outside made me snap the file shut, my pulse racing. I shoved everything back where I found it, locked the study again, and fled the house before my parents returned. Driving away, the questions swirled like a storm. Offshore accounts, secret agreements, Adam's name tied to it all. Whatever my parents were hiding, it wasn't just favoritism. It was something darker, something that explained why they couldn't sit in a crowded auditorium watching me graduate. Because while I was walking across that stage, smiling for strangers, they were busy keeping secrets that could destroy us all. The folder had burned in my memory all night. I couldn't sleep, not with the name Adam stamped on those documents like a brand. Whatever secrets my parents were hiding, my brother was at the center, and if anyone could give me answers, it had to be him. The next morning, I drove to his apartment, rehearsing what I might say. I hadn't visited often. His place was usually off limits to me. But when he opened the door, he looked startled, almost guilty, as though he had been expecting someone else. "Emily," he said, his eyes narrowing. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," I said firmly. "It's important." He hesitated, then stepped aside. The apartment was messy, empty pizza boxes stacked on the counter, textbooks scattered across the floor. For once, he didn't look like the perfect golden boy my parents idolized. He looked normal, human. I sat down on the couch, gripping my knees to steady myself. "Adam, I went to Mom and Dad's house yesterday. I saw things, files. With your name on them." His face went pale. He turned away, running a hand through his hair. "You shouldn't have done that." "Why? What are they hiding?" "Offshore accounts, legal papers, your name's all over it." I deserved to know. He let out a bitter laugh, but there was no humor in it. "You think you deserve to know? You've always been on the outside, Emily. You don't get it." "You never did." Anger flared in me. "Because no one ever gave me the chance. You and Mom and Dad, always shutting me out, always treating me like I don't matter. But I do matter. And if something dangerous is going on, I'm not going to sit quietly while you all pretend everything's fine." Adam slumped into a chair across from me, his bravado cracking. For a moment, he looked younger, vulnerable. "It's not what you think," he muttered. "Those accounts, those papers, they're not just about money. They're about control, about debts owed. Dad's been involved in things he can't back out of, and His voice broke off. "You what?" I pressed. He buried his face in his hands. "I'm tied to it, Emily. More than you realize. That's why they couldn't show up at your graduation. They weren't just ignoring you. They were meeting with people, dangerous people. If they hadn't, Things could have gotten ugly. My stomach dropped. Dangerous people? What are you talking about? I can't say more, he said sharply, lifting his head. If I do, it puts you at risk. Just leave it alone, Em. For once in your life, just don't dig. The way he said it, so desperate, should have scared me off. But instead, it lit a fire in me. For years, I had been told to stay quiet, to stay out of the way. Now I realized silence was exactly what had allowed this shadow to grow in my family. I can't, I whispered. Not anymore. He shook his head, frustration etched into his face. You don't understand. You think they ignored you because you weren't good enough. But the truth is worse. They were protecting you. They kept you invisible on purpose. Because if people knew about you, if they knew you were part of this family... He trailed off, eyes darting toward the door as though someone might be listening. My pulse hammered in my ears. Protecting me from what? Adam's jaw clenched. From being used against them. Against me. Against everything they've built. You think Dad's just a businessman? He's not. He stopped himself, shaking his head violently. I can't. If I tell you, it'll ruin everything silence stretched between us. Heavy and suffocating. I leaned forward, my voice trembling. Adam, I don't care about their empire, or their secrets, or whatever power games they're playing. I care about the truth. And if you really want to protect me, then stop lying. Tell me what I'm up against. For a long time, he just stared at me, his eyes searching mine. Finally, he whispered, there are things about our family you don't know. Things Mom and Dad swore would never touch you. But they can't keep the walls up forever. Not anymore. If you keep pushing Emily, you'll find answers. Just be ready. The truth isn't something you can walk away from once you have it. The weight of his words settled on me like a stone. I left his apartment more confused than ever, but also more determined. My whole life, I had been starving for acknowledgement, for a place in this family. Now I realized that being invisible might have been the only thing keeping me safe. But safe wasn't enough anymore. I needed the truth, even if it broke me. When I left Adam's apartment, the city felt different, sharper, louder, every shadow heavier than it should have been. His words rattled in my head, twisting into questions I couldn't shake. They kept you invisible on purpose. If people knew about you, what did that even mean? And what could my father possibly be involved in that required offshore accounts and secret meetings with dangerous people? I drove aimlessly for a while before ending up outside Mrs. Thompson's house. The lights in her living room were warm and inviting, spilling out into the evening like a beacon. I hadn't planned to stop, but something in me knew I needed to talk to her again. She answered the door quickly, as though she'd been expecting me. Her kind smile faltered when she saw my face. Emily, dear, you look like you've seen a ghost. I stepped inside, and the words tumbled out before I could stop them. I told her about breaking into my father's study, about the files, about Adam's strange warning. She listened intently, her hands clasped tightly together, her brows furrowed with concern. When I finished, she let out a slow breath. I was afraid of this, she murmured. You know something, I pressed. You've known all along, haven't you? She hesitated, glancing toward the framed photos of her late husband on the mantel. Your father and mine were once in business together. This was decades ago, before you and Adam were born. They built a company that promised great success. But your father, he took shortcuts. Deals with people who cared nothing for laws or ethics. My husband walked away when he realized how deep it went. But your father didn't. He doubled down, her words sent a chill down my spine. So he's been involved with... What? Criminals? She looked me straight in the eyes. Worse. People who own everything they touch. The kind of people you don't defy. I swallowed hard. And Adam? How does he fit into this? Mrs. Thompson's gaze softened, almost pitying. Adam was always meant to inherit it. The accounts, the properties, the ties. Your father groomed him for it since he was a boy. That's why they never missed his games, his milestones. Every event was a stage, A chance to show him off to those watching, to prove he was the perfect heir. And me? My voice cracked. Where did that leave me? Her silence was answer enough. But after a moment she added gently, your parents thought keeping you separate would protect you. If no one saw you as part of their world, you couldn't be used against them. But it also meant you were neglected. Invisible. A cruel kind of protection. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. All those years of being overlooked, dismissed, forgotten, it hadn't been because I wasn't good enough. It had been deliberate, a strategy. I wanted to feel relief, but instead I felt hollow. I wasn't invisible by accident. I was invisible by design. Emily, Mrs. Thompson said softly, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. You have a choice now. You can walk away and keep your distance, or you can keep digging. But if you do, you'll uncover things that can't be unseen. And the people your father is tied to, they don't forgive curiosity. Her warning should have scared me off, but instead, it made me burn hotter with determination. I had spent my entire life on the outside, wondering why I was never enough. Now I finally understood. It wasn't about me at all. It was about secrets. Secrets that had twisted my family into something I didn't recognize. I left her house with a storm inside me. The streetlights flickered overhead as I walked to my car, each shadow whispering possibilities. Offshore accounts, dangerous meetings, a legacy Adam had been groomed to inherit. My parents' absence at my graduation had been more than neglect. It had been a symptom of a life built on lies. That night, I sat at my desk with my laptop open, combing through public records, news archives, anything that might connect to what I'd seen in my father's files. I typed his name, his company, cross-referencing with foreign banks, with shell corporations, with property records. Most of it was a tangled mess, impossible to parse. But then, one article caught my eye. It was from 10 years ago, a small piece in a local paper about a business scandal that had quietly been buried. A partner in one of my father's ventures had gone missing, vanished without a trace. The article suggested foul play but never proved it. And in the middle of the piece was a name I recognized instantly, Mrs. Thompson's husband. He had testified against the partner before he disappeared. My hands trembled. Was that why she had been so wary? Because she'd already watched how close this world could come to swallowing someone whole? I leaned back, my mind spinning. If my father had connections to people who could make someone disappear, then Adam was right. This wasn't just about money or prestige. It was about survival, and if they had worked so hard to keep me invisible, maybe my presence at the graduation would have drawn attention I wasn't meant to have. Still, one question burned brighter than all the rest. Why now? Why, after all these years of keeping me on the sidelines, was everything unraveling? I didn't have the answer yet, but I knew this much. I wasn't going to stop until I found it. The next morning, the air felt heavy, thick with a tension I couldn't shake. My laptop sat open on the desk, the article about Mrs. Thompson's husband still glowing on the screen. Every instinct told me to close it, to forget everything I'd seen. But curiosity had its claws in me, and I couldn't let go. I decided to go straight to the source. If my father's company was just a front for something darker, there had to be breadcrumbs, business records, shell companies, maybe even whispers in the news that never reached the headlines. I typed his company's name into a business registry, tracing through subsidiaries and foreign branches. At first, it was dry, endless scrolling through corporate jargon, but then I saw a pattern. Dozens of companies, each with nearly identical names, incorporated across different countries. Each dissolved within a few years, only to be replaced by another, money flowing in, money flowing out. It was a carousel of shadows, and behind each one, my father's signature. My pulse quickened. This wasn't just shady accounting, this was laundering. My father wasn't merely connected to dangerous people, he was one of them. I printed a few documents, shoving them into a folder, but the moment I did, unease prickled at the back of my neck. From my window, I spotted a car parked across the street. Black, sleek, unfamiliar. I tried to dismiss it. Maybe a neighbor's guest. But my stomach twisted when I realized the engine was still running. Had I been noticed already? I snapped the blind shut, heart pounding. Maybe Adam was right. Maybe digging was a mistake. But I couldn't stop now, not when I was finally seeing the outlines of the truth. Later that afternoon, I went back to my parents' house, telling myself I needed more evidence. The key in the gnome still worked, and I slipped inside as quietly as possible. The house was empty again, but this time it felt different. Heavier, like the walls knew I was trespassing. I went straight to the study. The files were still there, untouched since my last visit. I dug deeper, rifling through papers until I found a thick folder labeled Property Holdings. Inside were deeds and titles, all under shell company names. Mansions, condos, even warehouses. It was enough wealth to build an empire, but what chilled me most was that some of the properties were marked with red check marks. Not sold, not mortgaged, marked, as if they had another purpose. I snapped photos with my phone, my hands shaking. Then I heard it, the faint sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Panic surged through me. I shoved the files back into place, locked the study, and darted into the hallway. The front door creaked open. I froze, heart hammering in my chest. My mother's voice drifted in, followed by my father's deeper tone. They were home. I slipped out the back door just as footsteps echoed through the hall. My feet hit the grass, and I ran to my car, my breath ragged. As I pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The same black car I'd seen earlier was idling at the corner. This wasn't paranoia anymore. Someone was watching me. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the apartment made me jump. Every shadow felt like it held eyes. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Stop digging. For your own good. My blood ran cold. I hadn't told anyone but Adam and Mrs. Thompson what I'd been doing, which meant either they weren't as trustworthy as I believed, or someone had been closer to me than I realized. I debated calling Adam, but I could already hear his warning. Just leave it alone, Em. He'd told me I didn't understand the risks, and now I knew he was right. But knowing didn't make me want to quit. It only made me more determined. By sunrise, I had made a decision. If my father was laundering money through shell companies and properties, there had to be a link to the people he was working with. And if those people were as powerful as Mrs. Thompson suggested, then their names would surface in ways that couldn't be erased. Court cases, arrest records, whispers in the business press. Somewhere, there would be proof. But as I packed my bag with the printed documents and my laptop, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had crossed an invisible line. The warning text had been clear. And yet, I was about to ignore it. Because for the first time in my life, my parents' world wasn't just shutting me out, it was pulling me in. And I wasn't sure I could get back out again. I spent the morning glued to my laptop, fueled by coffee and adrenaline. The printed documents from my father's study were spread across the table like puzzle pieces. Property holdings, shell companies, bank accounts, all circling around one undeniable truth. This wasn't a business empire. It was a web. And every web has a spider at its center. I typed the names of the companies into online databases, cross-referencing them with news articles, court filings, even obscure financial blogs. Most searches led to dead ends. But then, one property deed caught my eye. A warehouse on the edge of town, registered under the name Crestfall Imports. At first glance, it looked like another shell company. But when I dug deeper, I found records of shipments, massive ones, coming in from overseas. The items listed were vague. Machinery, parts, goods, no detail, just enough to look legitimate on paper. But the quantities were staggering, and there was no record of any of it being sold. My chest tightened. This wasn't just laundering, this was smuggling. I leaned back, staring at the screen. My father wasn't just moving money around. He was moving things. Things big enough, valuable enough to keep dangerous people in his orbit. The sound of a car passing outside made me flinch. My blinds were still drawn, but paranoia prickled at me. Was that same black car out there again? I forced myself to focus. One name kept surfacing in connection to Crestfall Imports. A man called Victor Hale. The more I searched, the darker the trail became. He was tied to fraud cases that had mysteriously been dropped, companies that had vanished overnight, and whispered rumors on message boards about deals gone bad. A ghost in the business world. And yet here he was, tangled up with my father. I scribbled his name on a notepad, underlining it twice. If Victor Hale was part of this, maybe he was the reason my parents hadn't shown up at graduation. Maybe the meeting with dangerous people Adam had mentioned was with him. But then another thought chilled me. If my father and Victor Hale were meeting that day, what were they discussing that was so important it outweighed their daughter's once-in-a-lifetime achievement? I needed to know. I grabbed my bag and the folder of documents, then drove across town to Mrs. Thompson's. When she opened the door, her expression shifted immediately. She saw the storm in my eyes. I found something, I said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. A warehouse, Crestfall Imports, and a name. Victor Hale. Her face drained of color. She sank into a chair as though her knees had given out. Emily, you need to stop. That's not an answer, I snapped. Who is he? She clasped her hands tightly, her knuckles white. Victor Hale isn't just a businessman. He's a broker. The kind of man who deals in whatever the highest bidder wants. Arms, information, people. He doesn't care what he trades, only that the price is right. And once you're in business with him, you don't walk away. My blood turned to ice. Arms, information, people. Suddenly, the vague shipment logs from the warehouse seemed sinister in ways I hadn't dared imagine. Your father made a deal with him years ago, she continued, her voice trembling. And when Victor takes a piece of someone's life, he never gives it back. That's why your parents invested everything into Adam. They needed him strong, capable, ready to inherit the burden. And that's why they kept you hidden. To Hale, invisibility is safety. Her words twisted in my chest. Safety. That's what my neglect had been? Not cruelty, not disinterest, but safety? The thought was almost worse. Then why now, I demanded. Why are things unraveling now? She hesitated, then said, because Victor doesn't like weakness. And your father, he's been slipping, deals gone wrong, money lost. Hale doesn't forgive failure. I pressed my palms to my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. My father had been playing with fire for decades, and now the flames were catching. And somewhere in that inferno, I had been dragged in, whether I wanted to be or not. Before I could speak again, Mrs. Thompson's eyes flicked to the window. Her lips parted in alarm. Emily, she whispered. Don't look, but there's a car across the street. My heart stuttered. Black? She nodded grimly. They're watching you. A cold sweat broke across my skin. The warning text wasn't just a threat, it was real. Someone had marked me. Mrs. Thompson grabbed my hands, her voice fierce despite the fear in her eyes. You need to be careful. If Hale's men know you're digging, they won't stop at warnings. You're treading in a world that doesn't forgive mistakes. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. Then I guess I can't afford to make one. But even as I said it, I knew the truth. I already had. The warehouse on the deed wouldn't leave my mind. Crestfall Imports. If my father and Victor Hale were connected through it, then that building had to hold more answers than any file could. Mrs. Thompson's warnings echoed in my ears, but they only made me more restless. If I didn't see it for myself, I'd never understand the full scope of what my family was entangled in. 2 nights later, I found myself sitting in my car on the edge of an industrial park, staring at the looming structure. It was enormous, the kind of place trucks rolled in and out of by the dozens. But tonight it was quiet, the only sound the hum of a streetlight buzzing above me. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. This was insane. I wasn't a detective. I wasn't trained for danger. But my father's lies had poisoned every part of my life, and if I didn't confront them, I would never be free of them. Pulling my hood over my head, I slipped out of the car and crossed the cracked pavement toward the warehouse. The chain-link fence had a gap near the corner, just wide enough for me to squeeze through. My heart hammered as I crouched low, every sound amplified in the silence. The main doors were locked, but I found a side entrance with a rusted handle. To my surprise, it gave way with a groan when I pushed. I slipped inside, holding my breath. The interior was dimly lit, vast rows of crates stacked higher than I could see. The air smelled of oil and dust, heavy and stale. I crept forward, my footsteps echoing faintly. Each crate was marked with vague codes. M241, PX310. Nothing that told me what was inside. I pulled out my phone and snapped a few pictures, the flash off, my hands trembling. Then I noticed a clipboard hanging from a hook near one of the rows, shipment logs. I flipped through quickly, my eyes catching on dates. One stood out, the day of my graduation. A delivery had come in, marked as machinery. But the quantity was far too high for anything ordinary. My stomach twisted. While I was walking across the stage, my parents had been here, overseeing this. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed from the far end of the warehouse. I froze, every muscle locked. The footsteps were steady, unhurried, like someone patrolling. A flashlight beam cut across the rows, sweeping dangerously close to where I stood. My breath caught in my throat as I pressed against the crates, praying I wouldn't be seen. The light lingered, then moved on. The footsteps grew fainter, fading into another part of the building. My pulse was a drumbeat in my ears. I needed to get out. Now. I turned to leave, but something made me stop. One of the crates near the exit had a corner broken open. Inside, beneath splintered wood, I saw a glint of metal. Carefully, I reached in and pulled back a piece. My blood ran cold. It wasn't machinery, it was weapons. Dozens of them, neatly packed, ready to be moved. Assault rifles, gleaming under the dim light. The air left my lungs in a rush. This was it. Proof. My father wasn't just laundering money. He was moving weapons through Crestfall imports. And if Victor Hale was involved, then these weren't meant for anything legal. I snapped another photo with shaking hands, then shoved the crate closed. My instincts screamed at me to run, but as I turned toward the door, I heard a voice. "Who's there?" The flashlight beam swung back, brighter this time, cutting directly across my path. Panic surged through me. I darted for the side door, the guard's footsteps pounding behind me. The metal door screeched as I shoved it open and sprinted into the night. The cold air hit me like a slap, but I didn't stop. I tore across the cracked pavement, ducking through the fence gap, my lungs burning. Behind me, the guard's shouts echoed, but I didn't dare look back. I dove into my car, fumbling with the keys. The engine roared to life, and I sped away, tires screeching against the asphalt. My hands shook so violently I could barely keep hold of the wheel. Only when the warehouse was a blur in my rearview mirror did I allow myself to breathe. I had proof now, real, undeniable proof. But it also meant I had crossed the line from curiosity to threat. The text message replayed in my mind. "Stop digging, for your own good." They knew I was digging. Now they knew I had seen too much. And for the first time, I understood the depth of the danger. I wasn't just uncovering secrets. I was exposing myself as a target. The drive home was a blur of headlights and panic. Every car in my rearview mirror felt like it was following me. Every turn of the road felt like a chase. By the time I reached my apartment, my nerves were frayed to the point of breaking. I parked blocks away instead of in my usual spot, then slipped through alleys just to make sure no one had tracked me. Inside, I bolted the door and collapsed against it, my chest heaving, my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with another message from the same unknown number. Last warning. That was it. No threats, no details. Just 2 words that felt like a death sentence. I staggered into the kitchen, pouring a glass of water with shaking hands. My mind was spinning. I had photos of weapons in crates, shipment logs, company records, all of it pointing to my father's empire being rotten at the core. But evidence was useless if I was silenced before I could share it. I thought of calling the police, but the idea collapsed as quickly as it formed. If Victor Hale had his claws in my father, he probably had them in law enforcement too. A man like that didn't operate without protection. Going to the wrong person could seal my fate. Instead, I dialed Adam. He picked up on the second ring, his voice groggy but sharp when he heard mine. What's wrong? I saw it, I whispered. The warehouse. Crestfall Imports. It's weapons, Adam, crates of them. A heavy silence filled the line. Finally, he said, "You shouldn't have gone there." "You knew," I accused, my voice breaking. "You've known all along, haven't you?" "Not everything," he admitted. "But enough. Dad tried to keep me out of it, but I wasn't. Blind. I've seen men come to the house, seen deals whispered in the study. He always told me it was for my own good. But you were supposed to stay away, Emily. That's why they left me out," I finished bitterly. "Why they left me to rot while they built you up." Adam's silence was heavy with guilt. "They thought invisibility would protect you. Then why am I the one being hunted?" I snapped. He didn't have an answer. Before I could press further, a loud bang rattled my apartment door. My blood froze. "Emily," Adam's voice crackled through the phone. "They're here," I whispered. I crept to the door, every nerve on fire. Shadows moved under the crack. A second bang shook the frame. My phone slipped from my hand as instinct took over. I ran to the fire escape, yanking the window open just as the door burst inward. Heavy boots pounded against my floor. Male voices, sharp and commanding. "Find her!" I scrambled down the fire escape, my palms scraping against the metal. My legs burned as I flew down flight after flight, the voices getting closer. I hit the ground running, disappearing into the maze of alleys, my breath ragged. Behind me, footsteps echoed. Then tires screeched as a vehicle pulled onto the street. A black SUV. I ducked behind a dumpster, pressing myself into the shadows as the headlights swept past. My heart thudded so hard I thought it might give me away. Minutes passed. The street grew quiet again. Slowly, I crawled out, every muscle trembling. My apartment was gone to me now. They'd know I had been there, know what I'd taken. I pulled out my phone. It was cracked from the fall, but still working. Adam's voice was frantic. "Emily? Are you okay? Talk to me." "I can't go back," I whispered. "They know. They're after me." "Listen to me," he said urgently. "Get to Aunt Carol's. She lives far enough out of town. They won't think to look for you there," I hesitated. Aunt Carol, my mother's sister. The one who'd always been a distant figure, barely present in family gatherings. Could I trust her? You don't have a choice," Adam pressed. "It's safer than staying out there alone." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Okay, I'll go." I ended the call and started walking, sticking to the shadows, every sense on high alert. The city that had once felt familiar now seemed hostile, every corner hiding danger. As I moved, a realization settled heavy in my chest. I wasn't just an outsider in my family anymore. I was a fugitive in their world. And the only way to survive was to stay one step ahead. The drive to Aunt Carol's house felt endless, the dark highway stretching before me like a tunnel with no exit. My hands clenched the steering wheel so tightly they ached. Every pair of headlights in my mirror sent waves of panic through me, but no one followed. At least not yet. By the time I reached Carol's place, an old farmhouse tucked deep in the countryside, the first light of dawn was creeping over the horizon. I parked far from the house, hidden under a cluster of trees, and approached on foot. The wooden porch creaked under my steps as I knocked. The door opened after a long pause. Aunt Carol stood there, her silver hair loose around her shoulders, her expression sharp but not surprised. "Emily," she said softly, "I was wondering when you'd come." Her calmness unsettled me. You knew I'd be here?" She stepped aside. "Come in. You're not safe out there inside." The farmhouse smelled of old wood and lavender. The quiet was almost suffocating after the chaos of the past few days. I sank into a chair at the kitchen table while she poured tea, my body trembling with exhaustion. "They came for me," I blurted, "at my apartment. Men. They knew I'd been digging." Carol set the cup before me, her eyes heavy with something between pity and resignation. "Victor Hale's men." I froze. "You know about him?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I know more than I ever wanted to." "Your father? He wasn't supposed to get this deep. When Diane married him, he was ambitious, charming. She thought she could help him build something good. But power is a hungry thing, Emily. And Richard, he fed it until it consumed him." My throat tightened. "So Mom knew." "She's known this whole time. She tried to shield you," Carol said. "That's why you were left out." Adam was the one they groomed, because they knew he'd have to stand in Richard's place someday. You were their sacrifice to normalcy. Invisible, but safe. The words landed like stones in my chest. Invisible. Safe. The narrative I'd told myself for years, that I was unloved, unwanted, wasn't the whole truth, but the reality wasn't any kinder. I rubbed my hands over my face. Safe? Do you know what it's like to sit at your graduation, waiting for your parents to show up, while everyone else's are there? Do you know what it's like to wonder for years why you weren't enough? My voice cracked. Safety feels a lot like abandonment. Carol's eyes glistened, but she didn't argue. She let the silence answer for her. Finally, she said, "You need to understand something, Emily. Victor Hale doesn't let loose ends dangle. You've seen too much. That makes you dangerous to him. And the only reason you're alive right now is because he thinks your father still has control. If he learns otherwise..." She let the sentence trail off, but the implication chilled me. "Then what do?" I whispered. She leaned closer. "You have two choices. You can disappear, leave this place, this country, and never look back. Or," her pause was deliberate, "you can burn it down, expose everything, but if you choose that, there's no going back. Not for you, not for your family." The weight of her words pressed down on me. Disappear or fight. Vanish into obscurity, or drag the shadows into the light. For years, I had been invisible. For years, I had let silence define me. But now I held proof. Documents, photos, logs. The world had ignored me before, but it wouldn't ignore this. "I can't disappear," I said, my voice steady despite the fear curling in my stomach. "Not anymore." Carol studied me for a long moment, then nodded as though she'd expected nothing else. "Then you'll need allies, and you'll need to be smarter than them. Hale will come for you the moment he senses you're a threat." I thought of Adam, his voice on the phone, torn between loyalty and fear. Of Mrs. Thompson, who had risked telling me the truth. Of Aunt Carol herself, who had lived in the long shadow of my parents' choices. Maybe I wasn't alone. Not completely. But as I sat in that quiet farmhouse, sipping tea that had gone cold, I realized something that hollowed me to the core. If I was going to survive this, if I was going to expose my father and Victor Hale, I had to become something I had never been allowed to be. Visible. For the first time in my life, the world was going to see me. No more being the forgotten daughter, no more being left behind. This was my story now, and I was going to finish it.